I'd like to introduce our first speaker, and that person is Ted Hansen from Convergen Energy. And Convergen is one of those thought leaders that I mentioned that is taking matrix byproduct from label printers and turning it into a reusable product for energy, which reduces the global impact of carbon. I'm going to let Ted introduce himself and talk more about his process and his company. Ted, thanks for being here.
Thanks. Thank you, Roz. Appreciate that. Let me get my presentation open here. All right, I think we're live. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roz. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys this morning. So, I work for Convergen Energy. We've got a facility located up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we have been in operation since 2009. And our company takes non-recyclable industrial byproducts that would otherwise go to the landfill, and we convert those into an alternative fuel that can be burned to produce renewable energy for either producing power or steam for industrial and municipal utilities that are looking to power our society in all the areas where we use power. We operate on a very large scale, so we're taking in a lot of materials from a lot of different sources. We have diverted over 600,000 tons of matrix and release liner and all kinds of industrial byproducts. We have diverted those away from the landfill. 600,000 tons is a mountain of material, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's a lot of material, and we can operate on a very large scale and take a wide variety of materials. And one of the things that's unique about this is that our fuel provides a lot of environmental benefits. And so we significantly reduce CO2 emissions when this fuel is used. And we partner with waste haulers, recyclers, generators of these materials to get them to our facility. We kind of call ourselves planes, trains, and automobiles. We figure out how to get it done, and there's a lot of different ways to make that happen, and we're happy to work with you on that to provide assistance. So what we're finding when we started this business in 2009, if we approached somebody about their waste materials, we had to provide a significant cost savings. Otherwise, nobody was really interested in talking to us. And over the years, we have found that the whole sustainability movement is just growing and growing and growing, and sustainability now really matters. When you look at the consumer is really analyzing their products to determine how is this sustainable. And if product A appears to be more sustainable than product B, they're going to buy product A every time now. And that's driving all of our suppliers to really get materials out of the landfill and figure out how can we become more sustainable. The other thing, we all know that foreign countries are no longer taking these non-recyclable materials. They're even not taking a lot of recyclable materials. We see landfill rates across the country just going up like crazy. We right now have customers shipping us materials from California or from the East Coast to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and they're doing that and saving money over the cost of their landfilling. So landfill rates just continue to go up. And I really feel sorry for the people that are trying to permit landfills in the US. I would not want to be doing that. Nobody wants a landfill in their backyard, and so fewer and fewer landfills are being permitted, and the rates are just skyrocketing. So even in the Midwest, where the landfill rates have typically been very low, we're finding those rates are going up. I was talking to someone in Texas that used to pay $10 a ton 3 years ago to dispose of their waste. They're now up around $35 to $40 per ton. So it's going up everywhere. So the other thing that we're seeing more and more, and you all are very aware of this, is EPR, the extended producer responsibility laws that are popping up everywhere. And the problem is these materials that we throw away end up in the environment, and they make very emotional pictures. We see the marine life, the aquatic life with waste in the oceans, and it creates a very emotional response. And so we are under tremendous pressure as an industry to manage our waste from a cradle to a grave life cycle standpoint. And then the other thing is we're seeing companies everywhere, especially the large companies, are signing up for these science-based targets for reducing global warming potential and reducing their greenhouse gases and their carbon footprint. And these science-based targets are making the accounting of every aspect of our production and our sales and our products become very visible. And so we're providing a solution that is taking that into account and helping companies understand how does this option of landfill avoidance help accomplish their science-based targets. So those are some of the things that are driving the desire to get these materials out of the landfill. So the Convergen solution really is a full solution, and it's very measurable. We have measured it from start to finish to really calculate, is this the best solution for waste? And when you look at articles everywhere, they're all talking about how investors are demanding sustainability, customers are demanding it, consumers are demanding it. Everybody wants to see this. And so what we've done is really broken it down to say, okay, if you're getting the waste out of the landfill, is this the best solution? Is this the right thing to do? And we believe we offer a solution that is. And the key is, the outcome is we're producing renewable energy. And I'm going to talk more about that, but by bringing your material to Convergen and getting it out of the landfill, you're enabling a lot of environmental benefits that we're starting to calculate and really put numbers on to say this is why it's better. So when we look at our solution, it's our Convergen circular economy that we are calling it. We bring in the byproducts. They're being generated from industries all over the US. So I always say, if you go up and down the grocery store aisle and you look at all of the packaging that everything is in, there are customers and producers making that packaging, and before the food or the products are ever put into it, they have all kinds of scrap. They have butt rolls, trim, obsolete material, all kinds of material that's going to the landfill by the truckload. And nobody ever sees it. It's not like your garbage that's sitting out on the curb that everybody can see. This stuff goes by the truckload and it goes to the landfill, and it's mountains of materials. So we take these materials that are non-recyclable. We do not want recyclable materials. If it can be recycled, we want it to be recycled. And we bring it to our plant where it's sorted, it's shredded, and it's blended in order to make an engineered fuel. And the reason for that is when you put these materials together in the right form, they produce a product that burns very clean. And by burning clean, it reduces the CO2 emissions, which I'll show you in another slide, compared to fossil fuel options. We then take those pellets and we send them to a municipal utility that's generating electricity. And then from there, the electricity can be sold back to the generator who is producing these waste materials. So one of the things that we're seeing, you guys have seen this in Texas with the with the blackouts that occurred a few winters ago. We're reading about it in California where they're having rolling blackouts at times. What we're finding is that as the country moves more and more to renewables, these renewable sources of energy are intermittent. So we all know the sun only shines a certain number of hours in the day. The wind only blows a certain number of hours of the day. And so we need base load power generation. So with these pellets, the particular utility that we're dealing with is able to convert them into base load power so that when the wind is not blowing or the sun is set, they're able to continue making renewable power for their customer base. So by bringing your materials to Convergen, it enables the use of more renewables. And it's kind of a great relationship there where the two really complement each other. And some of our customers are starting to now look at, okay, if I'm sending my materials to Convergen and it's enabling this renewable power to be produced, how can I capture the benefit of that in my carbon accounting? And so some customers are starting to look at acquiring the renewable energy credits that are coming from the power producer in order to use in their own carbon accounting. So it really closes that loop and creates more of a circular economy when it comes to the carbon accounting. So as we've been doing this over the last almost 15 years, we've always had anecdotal evidence and data that says it's better to take these materials out of the landfill and produce energy with them, but we've never really been able to prove that until recently. And now with all of the science-based targets and the accounting, the carbon accounting that's going on in the world, there are standards for how to do this. And so we have followed those standards through a third-party reviewed, independently reviewed life cycle analysis that compares the Convergen option to landfilling and other sources of energy to determine, is this really the best option? So what this life cycle analysis has done is it's taken a cradle to grave approach, and it's looked at, if you take your materials and you put them in the landfill, and then you're now pulling energy off the grid that's made from various sources, how does that carbon footprint compare to sending those materials to Convergen, which then converts them into power, which goes to the grid? And it's really fascinating to see that when you look at the baseload power options that are out there, not wind and solar, because they're not baseload, they're variable, they're up and down. But when you look at the baseload power generation options, the only ones that have a lower carbon footprint than our solution are hydro and nuclear. And of course, hydro and nuclear are zero carbon emission sources of power, so it's hard to beat zero. But when you compare to natural gas, which would be the middle bar, or coal power generation, Convergen provides up to a 70% reduction in CO2 emissions compared to those. So even producing power with the clean burning natural gas, we're a lower carbon footprint than any fossil fuel option. And so we now have this data to show that this really is the best way to do this. So the other thing is that by having this data, it allows us to provide that to our customers so that if they want to, they can take those energy credits and accredit them towards their carbon accounting. So again, as I said, we're finding that the big companies all over the world, they're demanding that all of their suppliers start to understand their carbon footprint and report that back to them, because they want to know if they're buying product X or buying product Y, which one is giving them the better carbon footprint. And so by doing this solution, you can take that data back to your customer and say, hey, here's why we are a lower carbon source than our competitor. And so that's why this data is really critical in driving what we're doing. So the other thing that we have found is that scale is really important. A lot of recyclers will talk about the number of pounds that they recycle. And we always talk in terms of tons. And we really complement recycling because we want recycling. Recycling is always the more economical option than turning the material into energy. So if it can be recycled, it needs to be recycled. But if you came to our plant and you looked at the materials we're getting, it's always this mixture of materials that are just so difficult to separate. So if you have a core with release liner wrapped around it, if you've ever tried to slab off a roll of release liner to separate the release liner from the core, you just get a slippery mess that is it's a huge safety issue in the plant. So you can take that roll that's got plastic wrapped around it, or maybe it's got labels already on it, and you can send it to us and we can just grind the whole thing up and we can handle large quantities, and it takes that work away from your plant. So the reasons we get the materials we do almost always is because there's just a blend of materials, whether it's matrix, a flexible film that's a multi-layer film, whether it's a material that's got a lot of inks on it. There's just a lot of reasons that make it difficult to separate, and so we can take these in large quantities and we can handle them. The other thing we find is that in almost every case, customers end up saving money by using this option versus landfilling. As I said earlier, we have customers shipping from California and from Massachusetts, and they can save money by doing that. If you really dive into your cost to dispose of this waste, you really find out there's a lot more to it than just the tipping fee at the landfill. When you look at the compactors and the rental fees and the cost of transportation, all of these things taken into account, if you put this material in the right form, you can oftentimes ship it long distances and not cost more money than what you're currently doing. The other thing is, if I go back to our life cycle analysis, we have found that the carbon footprint of shipping material, even from California to Wisconsin, it's a tiny, tiny piece of the carbon footprint when you look at everything and combined. So when you look at our total carbon footprint, transportation is less than 1% of all the carbon we're generating. Our manufacturing process is only about 3% of the carbon that's being generated. The rest comes from the production of electricity. So, the other thing that we are seeing, again, to scale, if you look at the lower bullet point on the right, we have one customer that has sent us enough byproduct to fill half of the Empire State Building with their material. These are huge volumes. If you could come into our plant every day and see how much is coming through, it's really striking. You're like, wow, I can't believe that we're landfilling this much as a society. Let me make sure. The other thing that we're doing is, as we develop this supply chain, I'll talk about it more towards the end of my presentation, but it's providing the supply chain that's allowing us to work with customers to start stripping off pieces of this for recycling. So a big part of what we're trying to do is build that supply chain that just generates the habits of recycling. So it's no different in your house. If you start recycling the paper in your house and you're putting that in the recycling bin, pretty soon your family members start saying, well, what else can we recycle? Oh, here's the plastic. Oh, I could do this. Oh, what about my water usage? How do I reduce water usage? Oh, how do I start to have landscaping that requires less water? It just gets you into a mindset of sustainability. And so by getting this material out of the landfill and just not throwing it in the dumpster, it just gets the whole plant thinking sustainability. And I think that's really important in order to take the really positive, meaningful steps that need to happen. So what kind of materials do we take? Again, we're taking materials that are non-recyclable. They're all pre-consumer industrial byproducts. So we have no post-consumer waste. And we're taking things like non-wovens, non-recyclable papers, release liner, matrix waste, flexible films, really multi-layer films, materials with a lot of ink are oftentimes not recyclable, nylon, styrofoam, all of these materials, they burn extremely cleanly when you burn them in the right conditions. And then we even take some kind of non-recyclable biomass type materials, like oat hulls, miscanthus grass, things like that. The material, the number one thing that we're avoiding is chlorine. We call it the dreaded V word for vinyl. So if you have PVC, polyvinyl chloride, It is a really, really high concentration of chlorine, and when you burn that, it creates all kinds of problems. So we do a lot to screen out chlorine. We also find there's a number of inks that are in a PVC carrier, and some inks cause materials not to be recyclable. So as you're designing for sustainability, really analyze your products and look for chlorine and get the chlorine out. That's very important. Let's see here. So what's the process for getting materials to us? So typically, if you reach out to us, we'll ask for like a Ziploc bag sample of a representative material. Oftentimes you can tell us what the materials are and we'll say, oh yeah, seen that, handled that, no problem, we can take it. But sometimes we need to see it, run it through our lab and test it. Specifically, we're testing usually for chlorine, just looking for weird stuff. Once that gets an approval, we'll usually try to set up a test load. It could be as simple as a Gaylord box of material. It could be a bale. It could be a truckload. Whatever works for you, we just want to get a representative sample. We'll run it through our process, do the testing on it, and then we may say, bring it on, we'll take it all. Or we might say, we need a few more loads. And then we turn the materials on, and then we find out what you really have. So inevitably you go through this whole process, and then all of a sudden you turn on the materials, and then you find out what's really in the plant. And usually there's a lot more than you think. But it's a very simple process. It's very straightforward, and we're happy to work with you on that. The other thing is we have kind of a come-as-you-are approach. We want to make it simple for you, so we try to handle waste in whatever form you have it. Some people literally just shove it into a semi. I don't know how they do it. We think they've got a cannon, and they're loading their waste into the cannon and shooting it into the trailer. We will take it. Others put it into nice, neat bales, and we really appreciate that. And it comes in full truckloads. Others have Gaylord boxes. Some just stack rolls on pallets and band them up. So however you handle your waste, we will try to accommodate that as much as possible. We do have a presentation after this one that's talking more about packaging and how to do that. Usually once you get past 50 miles, 100 miles from Wisconsin, you really want to bale the material. That's kind of the ideal packaging because you can load up a semi, send a semi-load. The other thing is we find is that once you start sending your material, especially if there's others in your area that we can connect you with, the truckers start to realize there's a pattern and there's a rhythm to this, that they can count on a backhaul every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so a lot of times you'll call up and say, I want a quote to ship from Ohio to Green Bay, and somebody will give you an outrageous number. And people say, I don't want to do it. And what we always find is take that step and get started, and we'll work with you. And as we get that rhythm down, that price will come down because the haulers know they can count on that material coming back. And they really begin to appreciate that. And we're happy to help with that. So when it comes to logistics, we do this all the time. We're happy to help you. So lastly, we're not standing still with just making alternative fuels. We're in the process of working with a couple of universities, and these universities are looking at specific pieces of these materials and how can we recycle them. And it's very encouraging. It's showing a lot of promise. It's enabling us to take in materials that we couldn't take before because we're creating processes that are removing contaminants, and it's enabling us to create materials that can potentially be upcycled. So we're hoping to get some commercial demonstration units going next year with some of these newer products. But when you send your materials to us, it does more than just create alternative fuel. You're also creating a supply chain where we want to work with you to get to the point where we're beginning to upcycle these materials more. So it enables more than just energy production. It's also enabling the research and the development that's going on to upcycle these types of products. So that is my presentation. If you're interested in learning more about this, I've got brochures up here, there's business cards, we've got some samples. I think Cal brought some samples around. You're welcome to take those, and I've got more, so don't worry about that. So with that, is it opening up to questions, or?
Yeah, if you have questions for Ted, we've got a few minutes. Feel free to, I can give you the mic.
Thank you, Ted. Great presentation. As far as your footprint around the U.S., I know you're only in Green Bay. Are there plans for other locations to limit those long truckload drives from California or
Right.
Georgia or wherever?
We are in active plans to expand in the Midwest. We don't have any immediate plans on the coast, but we're working on that. And so, again, by getting our tentacles out, today we don't have anything on the coast, but we're expanding and we're growing, and that's going to cause us to be able to build plants in other parts of the U.S. But you'd be surprised how much material we can bring in from long distances and make it work.
Anybody
That's a
else?
good question.
All right. Well, thank you, Ted, for a great presentation.